Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Perihan Abu Zaid, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Before we start this conversation, I'd like to introduce you to this series. So, this is the Navigating Uncertainty series in partnership with the Lighthouse Arabia under the Femtech Hub at the Women's Pavilion in partnership with Meme Foundation, American Hospital, Dubai, and Pear Care. This series is where we're creating space for more honest, grounded conversations around women's health with a particular focus on mental and emotional well-being. And they are conversations designed to be grounded, honest, and reflective of how women are actually experiencing their lives today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Rebecca, for leading this conversation. So Rebecca, let's dive in. So today we're talking about protecting yourself while you're building something. And uh, a lot of women hear the word boundaries, and we each have our definition to it. We kind of understand, okay, that it means possibly saying no when you need to. But from a psychological perspective, what does that really mean? And also, why is it always almost like a conflict with being resilient and sometimes even fulfilling your duty as a leader or as a mother or as a wife?
Mm. I think boundaries, I explain this to clients, is knowing where you start and end. So it's really becoming aware of you as an individual, physical, emotional container. Where do I start and end, and where does the other person or the environment or the organization start and end? And that allows us, I think, to embody the courage to say no, to step into what we need, what we value, what we may need to implement into our lives. I think boundaries is really about honoring yourself as a person, as a being, as a human. We all have needs. And I think that the number one obstacle to resilience is the expectation that I should just be able to navigate anything difficult in life, all kinds of roles and expectations, and never fail, never struggle, never find it difficult. So I think a boundary is also connecting to your limitations and your flaws as a human, and that knowing that that's perfectly normal and that we all experience that. Brené Brown, she has this really amazing quote around boundaries, which is daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. So, on a biological and psychological level, boundaries can feel very scary because we anticipate rejection, abandonment, disconnection. Everything in our body is wired for connection. So, the idea of saying no to someone, or that can wait, or I won't be able to join, or I can't help you, physiologically creates a feeling of anxiety because it ultimately is anticipated as disconnection. So that's why it can feel so scary and it's very visceral. Many women will say, if I have to set a boundary before it's even a negative thought in my mind about myself, I am feeling my heart racing, my stomach drop, my breath shallow. So it's really the body saying this feels scary to put ourselves in a position of anticipated loss. So it is really about getting comfortable with what our yeses are and what our nos are. But that can be really scary. So that's why I think we hear about it a lot, but we're not always confident in how to embody that and carry that out in relationship.
Oh, interesting. I never tied it to the idea of rejection or a disconnection. And that kind of reminds me of the concept of identity or perception of identity, especially for high performing women who are always givers. If I'm in the workplace, if I'm building a business, I'm giving, I'm supporting, I'm creating the environment for my team and my colleagues. If I'm building a family, then I'm doing the same for my kids and for my husband. And it's part of my identity. And I probably not fulfilling that perception we're meeting it means that I am being selfish. So I'm losing also part of my identity. Why do you think women tend to actually tie this to their identity, and they just keep saying yes, 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 when they need to say no, even when they know they need to say no?
I think from the moment women are born, little girls, we are unconsciously programmed to be good, to be quiet, to be pleasant, to be giving. We see that across different cultural dynamics and contexts within different family histories. We are often raised in environments where the little girl is praised for just being good and accommodating. That becomes part of our identity because we start to say, well, mum and dad are really happy with me. I feel loved. I am cherished. I am celebrated when I say yes. So I think even from our earliest of ages, we are conditioned to say, as a woman, I say yes. We also have these journeys throughout our life, such as pregnancy and, our cycles, which often require a lot of giving, a lot of energy. And I think then what we receive is feedback from society saying, oh, you're so helpful, you're such a great caretaker, you're so amazing at how much you give to others. So we're unconsciously reinforcing this idea that I am only as good as what I can offer, and it becomes a part of our identity. It becomes risky to think about being anything else but useful. So I think that, again, linking it to the experience of the body, there's a sense of it doesn't feel safe for me to say no. My identity now is based on how much I give, how much I sacrifice, how much I do, because the world around me seems to benefit and my relationships thrive. What often happens then is women become more and more depleted because there's less energy for them, there's less time, there's less focus, there's less self-care. And I love the when you said, about being selfish, because I remember attending a workshop once and she said, no, it's actually being self-full. And I thought, oh wow, that is so true, that actually taking time for myself is not selfish. Imagine if we said, it's actually being self-full, I'm giving back to me. And again, I'd like to encourage women to not always think about giving back to themselves just so they can build enough energy to then go and give out again. We're really thinking about sustainability and being able to say no, set boundaries, and think about themselves, and separating their identity from who they are and what they give and what they do. So I would encourage people to think about practices, people, places in their life where it's not about outcomes. It's not impacting anyone. It's really about values, passions, dreams, desires, and it's not always about the outcome of who they are, because otherwise it gets so tied up in our identity.
Mm. Can Okay, it's too early in the conversation, but I feel like we need to get a little practical. Can you give us sort of an example of how a woman can rewire her brain, or just like change her mindset about her own perception of her identity, so that, she doesn't fall into that rabbit hole?
Yeah, start with safe people. So take small risks with extremely safe people. And this is where you might practice with one or two people and you learn to set smaller boundaries at first with the least possible risk or something at stake. So it has to be something that doesn't feel like it would be too destabilizing, but start to practice with safe people saying no, even if you could say yes. And this is the thing, our awareness isn't enough. We have to practice in action. So our thoughts and our feelings have to align with the way in which we're showing up in the world. And over time, what you're teaching your mind and body is that when I say no, nothing bad happens. If that woman starts to experience repetitive or consistent rejection, resistance, or objection to that, that is going to be highlighting a pre-existing imbalance. So it's information. So you can really start to say, every day, I'm going to practice with a safe person setting a boundary. And you won't immediately feel the difference, but over a period of time, maybe 3 or 4 months, you'll start to realize, I'm able to say no to more things without being dysregulated. And if I can say no to my friend who I know I love and cherish, and they also feel safe to me, and they hold that space and respect me, I build enough kind of steadiness and stability and trust to go into the workplace or to go into a difficult conversation and say no. So I'd say start small and start with someone that you really feel safe with.
Oh, that is very helpful. My husband can expect a lot of no's
Yeah.
coming up soon. Okay, I want to shift gears to the concept of resilience because that you mentioned the idea of or the risk of being depleted.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, before getting to depletion or burnout, we are praised and rewarded for being resilient. When
Mm.
does resilience quietly become self-neglect and a pathway towards burnout?
I think we are often celebrated for pushing on, for just striving, for keeping on going. And that becomes an armor, becomes like a badge of honor that women wear again because of feedback, because typically in our kind of modern culture has got them into successful positions and places. But that resiliency, which is interpreted as always keep pushing and striving, over a period of time starts to create this kind of exhaustion, this always giving, always doing, always expending energy, which I think on the long run, when it's unmanaged, becomes burnout. And this is where we have to challenge the idea that burnout is just this kind of sudden experience that happens when actually it's often when we have this definition of resilience, which is I'm strong because I keep going, because despite being tired, I go to that high intensity gym class, because despite needing more sleep, I choose to complete my work tasks or go above and beyond for someone in my life. What's considered as resilience is often over giving, self-sacrificing, performing, masking. And this is where we have to challenge the idea that the most resilient woman in the room doesn't always mean that she's not struggling with some kind of anxiety, burnout, depression, low mood. It often comes from this idea of having very high expectations. So I would really encourage people to think, how do I define resilience? What actually does resilient mean to me? Because if it means that I push beyond all of my needs and limits, that might not be resilience. That might be performing or masking or seeking perfection.
Yes, absolutely. Especially if acts of service is one of your love language as well. Then, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe some of the attendees, they don't know what the five love languages are, but particularly acts of service.
Yeah, so we have the five love languages, which is the way in which we give and receive love. And so we will have our own love language, and it can kind of span across many of them. I know it's acts of service, physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, and gift giving. And so I think that women are probably constantly engaging in acts of service, which is in almost like a in socially inherited love language that we have, but it means that, often we are giving a lot, doing a lot, but we're not always good at saying, well, this is my love language, or this is the way in which I receive love. And so I think that's an interesting. Many women that I meet often find that things such as quality time or words of affirmation or physical touch are their love languages. So we might typically assume that acts of service is, but it also, I think women are craving to slow down and be nurtured and to have someone really spend quality time with understanding who they are and what they need, because they are so busy often giving and giving acts of service.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not, of course, if it's not something that is your love language, then it means that you're not only put in a position where you're almost forced to give something that you don't necessarily naturally want to give, and then you're also depriving yourself from another love language that you crave and need, as you said. You mentioned that burnout is not a sudden event that happens. Can we go back to definitions and just explain what exactly is burnout and what are the warning signs that we should pay attention to before we're at the end of that journey?
Yeah. Burnout is often at that kind of final stage and experience of unmanaged chronic stress. And so what starts to happen is that, we all are familiar with stress. Our nervous system responds to something stressful. We utilize the energy. It's helpful. We're having a presentation. We have to do a scary exam. We have to go out into the world and give our energy. That stress is helpful. We need it, and it's normal. What becomes chronic and unmanaged is when the nervous system never gets time to decompress and downregulate. And so what tends to happen is, we'll see this in women saying, I'm waking up chronically fatigued. I don't feel like I can sleep properly. I'm skipping meals. I'm running on caffeine. My work requires me to give a lot. I'm also managing multiple hats and roles within the day. I don't have any transition time. I don't have any time to switch off. And so what we have here is a nervous system that is stuck on fight or flight. Polyvagal theory really demonstrates this because it talks about the activation of unmanaged stress. We live in a place of fight or flight, and that means that we are chronically activated. We are maybe more anxious, irritable. We are scanning the environment, and everything feels like a threat. If we stay in that place for too long and we don't get moments to calm the nervous system down, to go into that rest and digest, to really let the body know, I have left work now, the kids are in bed, I am safe to decompress and relax, we can go into a place of shutdown. And this is where I think we typically see burnout, which is a complete loss of energy, motivation, meaning. There's a sense of not feeling connected to yourself. I don't feel like my work is worthy or I have anything to offer. I don't feel like there's meaning attached to it. It's often a lot of emotional exhaustion. We also see that it's a place where we go into kind of collapse and shut down. So we withdraw from the things that typically give us energy. And women often criticize themselves in this space. All of the negative thoughts start to come up. I'm weak, I'm a failure, I've done something wrong. What did I do? There's a lot of self-blame when actually the body has gone into a place of protection. It's saying, you are so overwhelmed right now. I need to shut down anything that's not necessary so we can recoup and recover. And this is why I say it's a gradual experience, because it just starts to build up over a long period of time. And at the point in which someone is experiencing burnout, that's when the body and nervous system says it's been too much for me. And so at that point, that's where we typically see we need clinical intervention. We might need time off work. Therapy is really helpful, maybe medication. But, at some point we can look at what tools and techniques women can implement to just support that. But it's really at that point of, I'm emotionally exhausted, I'm depleted, I have a sense of depersonalization. So my meaning, my values, I can't connect to that. And I'm also feeling this kind of loss of connection to life, really.
Hmm. So it does have a lot of physical implications as well. Sometimes like burnout or chronic stress feels physical more than even mental or psychological, right? Um, One of the things that women, and speaking of expectations, that women hear a lot is, eat well, sleep well, exercise, and just like adding layers and layers and layers of expectations of, what women need to deliver, even when it comes to their own bodies. You have to be a certain shape, you have to look a certain way, all of those kind of things. And if you are a mother, if you're a female leader, if you're a wife, if you're taking care of an aging parent, that adds even more to the stress, right? Because you have your own duties to fulfill, but then you have also the societal expectations that you have to meet. Uh, how would you advise our listeners today in sort of creating that balance so that, yes, it is good to eat well, good to exercise. It's important to do that, but without making it another source of stress that could potentially get you into burnout.
Mm. Define what good enough is for you. So
Hmm.
sit with yourself away from the distractions of social media, what's happening online, what your colleagues are doing, what friends might be doing, and define in my body, in my nervous system, in my current situation. I may have 4 children, I might have 2 jobs, whoever you are and wherever you might be, define what your good enough is and get really clear on the stories that you tell yourself about who you are. You know, if you notice that I only have half an hour to take the dog out for a walk, but that half an hour, I wish it could have been an hour. I wish it could have been, oh, they would love to go here, or I should have taken the kids to this particular place, or in my spare time, I should have been doing that. Notice the stories that you tell yourself, because I would actually argue that the stories we tell are more activating to our stress response than it would be ordering a takeaway. It's the way that we think about it that actually activates the response. So it's practicing that radical acceptance of where you are. This is what I can do, and this is my good enough. It's also, I think one thing that really helped me is removing 2 things that activate your stress response and add one thing in its place. So for me, it was when I get home from work, I have an hour of put my phone on do not disturb, and I just separate from it for an hour. Also, when I'm out walking, I don't listen to anything. I put my phone away. And instead of that, I added time to read. I added time just maybe to sit in the morning and have a slow morning. I removed having earlier client sessions and I added having a slower morning for myself. So I don't want women to get in the habit of adding more and more and more onto an already exhausted foundation. You really work with the basics and remove 2 things that you feel are activating, unhelpful, burning you out, and you add one thing that is supportive and nourishing for your nervous system.
Oh, amazing. I once got a very nice tip from a mentor of mine, and she was like, outsource, delegate anything that you don't need to do to feel, to serve your ambition. And I realized that, yes, even as a mother, I felt like I was under this perception that I need to be doing the dishes, I need to be cooking the meals, I need to be changing the nappies, like doing it all to be a good mother. And when in fact, my kids want quality time for me to be a good mother to them. So delegating all those things removed from my long to-do list, my sources of stress without denying me that sort of fulfillment. And that brings me to the idea of ambition as well. Um, how would you describe sustainable ambition in real life, and especially ambition that's driven from you rather than society?
Connect with your values.
Mm.
Connect with the values in which are most important to you, because many women that I speak to are building or working towards ambition which isn't defined by their own values. So they will be pushing themselves and striving in and engaging in unsustainable practices or activities without actually considering, well, does this align with my values here? Of maybe creativity, playfulness, adventure, self-development, exploration, connection. If you are building ambition based on another person's system of values, then that's always going to feel stressful for you. You know, connecting with your values and incorporating that into your day as you can, because I think what happens is that we start to build a life around this experience of stress, which then masks the experience of burnout. We don't become aware anymore that we're feeling this way because all of our practices support us living in this unsustainable energy. So really focusing on sustainability rather than intensity. I think it's building a life based on values, not usefulness. Um, Building systems of support. You know, in order for us to be ambitious in one area of our life, we have to replace what we can't do with support. And I know this is difficult, I think, for women in our modern culture, because I think, society and the structures have changed, but the support system hasn't. We've actually had more ability to succeed and strive and be in positions of leadership with less social support and structure. So find your tribe, whether that's, someone who supports you with the cleaning, or a friend who can support you with picking up the kids from school, someone in the workplace that is a safe person you can speak to about how you're feeling. That allows you to be as ambitious as you need, because you are providing a structure of support. I think it's also not being ashamed to ask for support. Again, I think this comes back to that deeper experience of setting boundaries and values. I'm a human. I cannot do it all. And that is not a character flaw. That's not an imperfection. That's not a representation of my capability or efficiency. I need to accept that I'm human. And when I can radically accept that, I can start to outsource. I can delegate. I can say, okay, I need support with this. Um, I also think it's about practicing recovery. So if you are a highly ambitious woman, you don't need to choose either or. And I think that's what we've always felt. I either choose being a mother, or I choose being a businesswoman. I choose being this or that. And we're full of these kind of contradictory roles. Whereas what I'd like people to think about is, how can I practice or implement a kind of recovery tools and support that allow me to be as ambitious as I am and want to be. And so I think it's a combination of different things.
Oh, amazing. Speaking of support systems, how can women learn to protect their boundaries, set expectations on what resilience is to them, what is their identity, and the boundaries they need to protect without ruining relationships, especially in a society like the UAE, where our support system is most likely our spouses or our parents, because we don't have that full village that we would back home. How would you protect the relationships or avoid damaging the relationship, but still protect your boundaries?
I think communication is key. And that's, I think, something we hear all the time. And everyone says, okay, yeah, communicate my boundaries. But I think that's essential. There's so many women I speak to and I say, does your partner know about how you're feeling? Or do they know how exhausted you are? Or have you spoken to a loved one or a friend about the support you might need, and they say no, and they haven't been able or felt safe or grounded enough to say this is actually what I'm experiencing. But it's understanding that a healthy relationship is one that is full of boundaries. Again, where do I start and end, and where do you start and end? And being able to communicate what you need, whilst you will experience a temporary discomfort, it's for the longer term gain. So I invite women to say, am I willing to experience this temporary discomfort of saying, I need you to support me with this, knowing and trusting that the longer term gain is a reduction of resentment, a reduction of anger, irritability, feelings of disconnection and betrayal. And most women will say, well, I'm fearful of the conflict. What if this person responds with rejection, tension, arguing? And I say to them, well, if you don't set the boundary, that fear of conflict will most likely come up for you, because you will start to feel resentful. And I think women are very kind of skilled at saying, I'm going to keep myself safe and I'm going to keep moving on and carrying it all. And that also leads to burnout, the emotional and mental load of holding everything together. So I would say, regulate yourself. Number one, radically accept it's okay to have the boundary in the first place. I am entitled, deserving. This is completely normal and human for me to have this need. Once I can regulate that in myself, I am going to take the risk of communicating it with the people that I love. Whatever you may experience in that relationship will be information for you. If you have, like I said, repetitive experiences of someone saying, I don't respect your boundaries, I'm going to push them, I'm going to prod them, it gives you information about the kind of relationship that is, and will, I think, be a message for you to reassess. And so I want you to see everything as important data. not as something to be fearful of. And really, that the feedback you get is only going to be beneficial for your well-being and your mental health.
Mm. And we often amplify the result of the risk that we're not willing to take. So you might worry that, I don't want to have this tough conversation because it might cost me my relationship, when in fact, the likelihood of this happening is very, very minimal compared to the gain that you can get out of it. Um, all right, so let's get practical, because I know you have a lot of tools here in your bag. You're like the Mary Poppins of psychological and mental health tools. Let's start with if somebody who's listening and feels they're already running on empty, where do they start and what do they need to do?
Slow down. And people will hate me saying that. They'll be like, what do you mean slow down? But the number one thing I encourage people to do, if anything today, is practice slowing down in everything you do. Part of what um, continues burnout and kind of keeps it alive is that anxious, stressful energy of activation. It's everything needs to be restless and up and out and quick and fast. Slow everything down. Even if I make that cup of tea, I'm going to do it really slowly, or I'm going to drive a bit slower to work. And I myself was practicing this a few months ago when I was feeling quite stressed, and I hated it. It was like, this is horrible slowing down. But I noticed after I practiced it that I genuinely felt my stress levels reduce. And so, if you can't physically or practically remove anything right now, slow it all the way down, because you might have 10 tasks to complete. But if you can take a body into that task that feels grounded, stable, and regulated, you are going to reduce the chances of experiencing overwhelm and burnout. Again, I would really invite women to try and have pockets in their day of quietness, of slow mornings without distractions. Even if that means I'm going to just set 10 minutes aside in the morning, 5 minutes at lunch, 10 minutes just to decompress. A very a very kind of accessible tool is to do some breath work. So there's an amazing app called Insight Timer. And if you Google that, they have 5 minute meditations, 2 minutes somatic resets, 10 minutes, and you can choose. You can say, I have 1 minute right now and I'm stressed, and it will give you an amazing tool just to implement. I don't want people to think that you have to create a schedule, which is 5 a.m., ice bath, eating well. If you can start to just have micro adjustments to your day, slowing down, moments of quietness, regular nourishing meals, this is a huge one for women. And, we often see that some of the foundations to chronic stress and burnout is women that aren't sleeping properly, eating properly. Even if you can't, make all your own meals or have nourishing food all the time, I want you to eat at least regularly. Women need to be eating every 4 hours or so to make sure that our hormones stabilize. As soon as we have coffee on an empty stomach, or we have, meals that are inconsistent or sporadic, our hormones and our cortisol and adrenaline start to spike. So we really have to work on these foundational practical tools, also making sure that you have enough sleep. And I know that we hear this all the time. And again, it is such a powerful tool. And even if you may struggle with sleep, you have late working hours, try to have a digital sunset. So when the sun goes down, everything in your house and on your phone should align with that. You swap over to darker colors, you start to have low lighting on, you let the body know it's time for rest. And this helps with the transitional nature of, I'm going from a busy working day where I'm expected to give to a slower evening where I'm able to decompress and rest and relax. I think physical touch is also a really important one. I think that women need to feel nourished and cared for. Whether you have a partner, a friend, you can get a massage done, self-massage. Grab your favorite oil or lotion, and just for 2 minutes, just work with the parts of your body that have been holding stress throughout the day. I start this with my clients in some sessions who struggle with that transition of giving and working to going into the space of therapy. find the part of your body that holds the most tension and armoring, because that's often the part that we use to be perfect and perform and mask. And just let that part of your body know it's okay to soften and relax right now. So this is a very physical way to also communicate to the body. We have transitioned from a place of giving and doing to rest and digest. Trying to think of some more practical tools. Anything I've missed or
I'm like reflecting on my own life. What am I gonna do? I feel like I'm gonna do that. But I think it would be nice to also add something for the working women as well. Um, these things obviously are great, especially when you go home. I love the digital sunset. I'll start practicing that myself. But what if I'm at work? We're always like, in a high stress environment. I'm like hunched over and, you know, getting people walking in, walking out, asked for tasks, moving from one meeting to the other, driving from one meeting to the other sometimes. What are some of, again, like practical tools that can help us slow down or reduce that stress in the workplace?
I would say if you have the flexibility around your meetings and your responsibilities, set breaks in between. And this may feel like it goes against the whole efficiency and time and everything cramming into one. And I used to do this. I would see, well, I want to see 3 or 4 clients back to back, and that's going to be time efficient for my day because then I can have more time at the end of it. But I was actually more depleted because of that. So
Mm.
now I schedule breaks, even if it's a 5-minute reminder to say, take a breath, go and have a cup of tea, connect with a loved one, go and have a conversation which involves you laughing or decompressing. Start to be open and honest with your team about how you're feeling. Practice not responding with "I'm fine."
Mm.
I would actually, and my clients laugh at me because they think it's really simple, but I get them to print out a feelings wheel. And I say, I want that feelings wheel on your desk. And if someone says, how are you? Before you just say, I'm fine, I want you to look at the feelings wheel and you might say, you know what, I'm overwhelmed right now, or I'm feeling playful, or I'm feeling nurtured, excited, I'm feeling burdened. It helps people understand you in a relational way so you can start to build more trust and support within your team. I also think it's really important to try and engage at some point with nature. So, whether that's going outside on your lunch break and just letting your body connect with that time of day, getting some sunlight on your face, it's these tiny micro movements. If you have a stressful meeting, a difficult conversation, maybe there's been a kind of big chunk of your morning that's been dedicated to a task, go and pop on a song and shake it out. So a lot of burnout and stress is, like we're saying, physical and visceral. So it's emotions that get trapped in the body. I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I'm fatigued. Put on your song and shake it out. You can pat, you can do all of these things that just help reset the body because we're working with the nervous system. And I also encourage women to get familiar with their cycle if they are experiencing a cycle. If you are having a monthly period, even for perimenopause, postmenopause, understand that the hormonal shifts you are experiencing will determine and shift the way that you show up. So, for women that are experiencing a cycle, I would encourage you to research cycle syncing. And I want you to learn about your periods because what I encourage women to do then is to create a schedule at work where they allocate certain tasks, commitments, energy, projects based on where they are in their cycle. Because we cannot deny that as women, we have a whole biological, physiological system that impacts the way that we show up. Some weeks we are great at doing social events and being out in the world, and other times we just want to hibernate and say, no, I need to get these done and don't disturb me. That typically comes with such a huge amount of stigma, shame, judgment. But if you can start to in the ways that you can be flexible and have some kind of adaptability over your work schedule, you can say, well, I'm actually going to schedule this event when I'm most likely to be wired and hormonally geared to be out in the world. And then you stop all of that negative self-talk about, well, why did I feel this way one week and not the other week? So get to know your cycle. If you're post menopause, understand the hormonal shifts and start to implement these tiny little things that can support you throughout your day. So one thing that I want women also to remember is that being a woman doesn't mean you have to sacrifice ambition, success, leadership. It just means that we have to work with our bodies in a way that supports us to do those things, because we've often believed that we have to choose. I can't be all and I can't do it all, but we can. We just have to have a very supportive system that allows us to do it. So that would be my offering for that.
Amazing. I have one last request for a practical tip, but just before that, a note to our listeners, if you have any questions, please pop it in the Q&A section of this call. Now, you spoke about sleep. Do you have any tips for to get good quality sleep?
Yeah. So if you have a bath, Epsom salts, they are the best way to help the muscles decompress and relax. If you don't have a bath, you can have essential oils like lavender and really reduce your screen time. So if you are someone, so many of my clients say, I get into bed and I scroll to fall asleep because it makes my mind tired. And I say to them, at least an hour, if you can do at least an hour, keep the phone out of the bedroom, read a book or have a notebook that's next to your bed, that if you are someone who typically has lots of thoughts that start to run around your mind, brain dump, right? Everything that you're thinking of into that notepad, but start to set up a sleep hygiene habit system where you say an hour before bed, no screen time. I'm going to pick up a book. I might color, I might brain dump. I'm going to use my senses to engage, because we have to teach the body that it's time to rest. We are full of artificial lighting now. So if we had the luxury of living in nature, we would say, oh, okay, the sun has set, melatonin starts to produce, I'm going to rest now. We're often on our devices until, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. So I want you to have a consistent sleep time. I want you to practice having at least an hour before bed, free of devices or any kind of stimulation. Engage in a creative practice, reading, drawing, stretching, moving, whatever that might be. And then also keeping a journal, having a brain dump if you can. And there's another one that I wanted. Also, get your blood work done. So if you find that you are someone that struggles with sleep, just notice if there's any deficiencies there, because there may be, magnesium could be really supportive, melatonin. See if there are any also physical aspects to maybe things that you are not receiving through your food, or you may need more supplements, and avoid coffee after a certain time. I'm extremely sensitive to coffee. So even if I had one in the morning, I probably wouldn't sleep in the evening, but limit your coffee intake. Because if you have caffeine after a certain time, I think it takes like 12 hours for it to come out of the system. Or if you do have coffee, have a decaf, have it with a meal. So there's all of these tiny practices that feel quite simple and mundane, but are the best things to support with your sleep.
Nice. All right, for us to conclude this very insightful session, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you, Rebecca. Can we close with your reflection on what would be one belief about success, strength, self-worth that you believe women may need to unlearn in order to sustain themselves long term?
I would say that I am defined by the outcome. I think that's something we have to unlearn. I am defined by the outcome of what I do, of what I give, of who I support. And I think this comes down to the boundary setting, when our sense of self becomes blurred with the happiness, the outcome, the success, the experience of others, or the places in which we work in, that will always rob us of our ability to feel valuable and worthy as we are. So I would say, I want you to unlearn all of the ways in which you value your worth based on the outcome of parenting, professional support, caregiving, and to connect again with who you are outside of those practices. So, in what relationships, in what places, with what people do I experience myself when it's not outcome driven?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This was absolutely amazing. I'm not a fan of checklists, but I feel like I need a checklist of all the tools that you've shared with us so I can use them. I will definitely practice most, if not all, of the tips that you've shared with us today. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks to our listeners. As a reminder, this is part of a series, Navigating Uncertainty. So please follow the Women's Pavilion and LightHouse Arabia accounts to know about the upcoming sessions. Our next one is actually scheduled on June 9th at 4 p.m. And it is targeting an audience that's often neglected, which is youth, who are, part of women who need to navigate uncertainty but are not necessarily equipped with the knowledge and skills, and we're hoping to give them some of those tips like you shared with us today. So please follow the account so that you can actually know about the upcoming sessions and register. And if you have daughters, definitely have them attend that one. Thank you again, Rebecca, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was really great to see you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Thank you so
All
much.
right.
All
Take
right.
care.
You too. Bye.